Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Catherine and this is Raspberry Reads. So today I'm really excited to share with you some of my most anticipated books of 2024. Now I say some because there are way too many to share in one video, but these are just a few of the books that I've seen on Waterstones or Blackwell's websites the past few months, or I've seen other booktubers talk about them, and I'm really excited to give them a try. So without further ado, let's jump into my most anticipated books. And just to say, I've got my computer in front of me so I can refer to the information in the blurbs to share with you. So the first book we have is a book by Tracy Chevalier, and this is called The Glassmaker. Now this is historical fiction. And I've loved Tracy Chevalier's work. I haven't read all of her works, but I have read and loved The Girl with a Pearl Earring, as well as Remarkable Creatures. And for the most part, I also enjoyed A Single Thread that I read last year. Now I find Tracy Chevalier's writing to be dependable, and what I mean by that is that I know that the quality of her writing will be on point every time, and I also know that she is guaranteed to tell a good story. And for that reason, I'm excited for this next book to come out. And it's released in September. Now I'm just going to read the blurb to you because I think that encapsulates it much better than I can sort of paraphrase. So it says, Venice, 1486. Across a lagoon lies Murano. Time flows differently here. Like the island's maestros spend their lives learning to control. Women are not meant to work with glass, but Orsola Rosso flouts convention to save her family from ruin. She works in secret, knowing her creations must be perfect to be accepted by men, but perfection may take a lifetime. Skipping like a stone through the centuries, we follow Orsola as she hones her craft through war and plague, tragedy and triumph, love and loss. Her creations will adorn the necks of empresses and courtesans from Paris to Vienna, but will she ever earn the respect of those closest to her? What a fascinating blurb. So the reason why this book particularly appeals to me, not just because it's written by Tracy Chevalier, is that firstly, it's multi-generational. I love a good multi-generational historical fiction or literary fiction. It features a strong female protagonist. So I think I mentioned in my booktube newbie tag that having a strong female character is something that I really enjoy in my reading. It also has a little bit of trailblazing, so a woman that's picking up a craft that's not conventional. And I think also that Tracy Chevalier pays excellent attention to detail when she writes about particular crafts or practices. So for example, with Remarkable Creatures, there was a lot of really good information in there about fossil digging and that practice in the 19th century. And also with A Single Thread, the amount of detail she put in about embroidery was really fascinating to read, and bell ringing actually. So I'm sure she'll do an excellent job with conveying the history and craft of glassmaking. So yeah, I'm excited to read it, and let me know if you're excited to read Tracy Chevalier's book coming out in September, and also if in general you enjoy her writing. Moving on, the second book I want to mention is Kristin Hannah's The Women, and this just came out. It came out in February. Again, this is historical fiction. Now I don't want to say a bit embarrassed, I'm actually hugely embarrassed to admit that I have not yet read a book by Kristin Hannah. There's so much hype around them, and it seems like the type of historical fiction that I would absolutely devour. So perhaps I'm a little bit worried that I'll be disappointed. I'm sure I won't, but you know, when you put something on a pedestal and then if it ends up disappointing you, you feel like you've let yourself down, and you've also let other people down who recommend it to you so much, my mother being one of them. Much like the premise of all of her other books, the premise of The Women interests me. So this story is about a young American woman who joins the Army-Navy Corps during her brother's enlistment in the war in Vietnam. And so I'm just going to read you a little blurb. So it says, as green and inexperienced as the young men sent to Vietnam to fight, Frankie is overwhelmed by the chaos and destruction of war, as well as the unexpected trauma of coming home to a changed America. Frankie will also discover the true value of female friendship and the heartbreak that love can cause. So again, we have a strong female protagonist. I'm wondering what female friendship means. Do we have any queer representation in here? We'll see. And I tend to not shy away from fiction or nonfiction that focuses on sad or challenging themes like trauma. It's actually, I don't say it's something I enjoy, but it's something that intrigues me in my reading. So for that reason, I'm interested to get to this book at some point. Are you a Kristin Hannah lover? If so, are you excited for this book? But also, I have an important question. So if you've read Kristin Hannah, do you think I'm making a terrible mistake by having this book be my first Kristin Hannah? Should I perhaps start with something like The Nightingale or The Great Alone, just in case this one is maybe not a bit of a dud? I'm sure it won't be, but yeah, let me know. Do you think I'm making a mistake and I should start with one of her other works? Okay, so the third book I want to share with you is called The Other Valley by Scott Alexander Howard. And I have to give a shout out to Audrey Approved because I was watching one of her most anticipated books coming out in 2024 videos, and she mentioned this book and I thought, ooh, that sounds like something that I want to read too. So The Other Valley is out in April. I'm not sure what the genre of this is. When I read the blurb, I thought it was dystopian, which is certainly my cup of tea, but it might actually be more so defined as literary speculative fiction. Either way, it sounds like something I want to read. So it seems to be about a series of towns or communities that are located within the same valley, but some of the towns are set 20 years in the future and other towns are set 20 years in the past. And so it features a young girl named Odalie, I think that's how you pronounce it. And she appears to be destined to become like a council leader who holds special status in the sense that she would be allowed to judge who gets to travel across these time borders between the various communities in this valley. So that sounds really intriguing. So again, we've got a strong female protagonist. I think this book also features female friendship, which is always something I enjoy reading about. It seems to focus on grief, which sometimes I love, sometimes I don't. Depends. And time travel, I think. And so if it's got time travel in, then sign me up. I think that this book, if it is accurately described in the blurb, I think it will be like The Giver by Lois Lowry, and that is one of my favorite books of all time. So if it has parallels to The Giver, then I'm sure it will be fantastic. Have you heard about this book? Let me know if you have and if you're excited to read it too. Okie doke, so moving on. Next we have James by Percival Everett. This book comes out in April. And what it is it's a reimagining of the classic Huckleberry Finn, but it's from the perspective of Jim, who is the enslaved loyal friend of Huck. Now, I haven't read Huckleberry Finn, nor have I read any of Mark Twain's work, which I'm a bit disappointed about because Mark Twain was one of my dad's favorite authors. So I thought, perhaps I should get to Huckleberry Finn at some point this year, but also I'd like to read this book maybe in tandem with it to see how they are similar and different. The premise of James reminds me a little bit of Octavia Butler's Kindred, in the sense that focused on a black woman and a white man and the relationship they had, although it was across different time periods. And maybe it might also be a little bit like The Prophets by Robert Jones Jr., in the sense that how it's described seems to be about an unlikely, powerful relationship between two men. So yeah, it's an intriguing premise. There's lots of these sort of retellings out there, and I like that. I enjoy the Greek myth retellings, but I also enjoy retellings of classics. So I'm excited to try this one when it comes out, and that's in April. Next up, we have The Hunter by Tanya French. And hooray, it's a crime thriller, and it comes out in March, and I love a crime thriller. They're such comforting reads in a bizarre sort of way. I mentioned this in another video that I find the format predictable and therefore comforting. So I'm going to read the blurb to you and you can see what you think. So it goes, Cal Hooper was a Chicago detective till he moved to the west of Ireland looking for peace. He's found it, more or less, in his relationship with local woman Lena and the bond he formed with half-wild teenager Trey. So when two men turn up with a money-making scheme to find gold in the townland, Cal gets ready to do whatever it takes to protect Trey, because one of the men is no stranger, he's Trey's father. But Trey doesn't want protecting. What she wants is revenge. So that sounds like such an intriguing premise. And the revenge element certainly has me hooked. I think if I had to guess, I will probably read this book on audio, or listen to it rather. So I might have to wait a while because I tend to listen to audiobooks through my local library via the Libby app. But yeah, have you heard of this one? Are you interested in reading or listening to it when it comes out? Let me know. All right, moving along, we have another historical fiction, though I think it has fantasy elements in it as well. So this is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. And this book, this book comes out in March, so not long to wait now. This is a bit of a long blurb, but it's so beautifully written that I'm just going to share it with you. So it says, in a shabby house on a shabby street in the new capital of Madrid, Luisa Cortado uses scraps of magic to get through her days of endless toil as a scullion. But when her scheming mistress discovers the lump of servant cowering in the kitchen is actually hiding a talent for little miracles, she demands Luisa use those gifts to better the family's social position. What begins as simple amusement for the bored nobility takes a perilous turn when Luisa garners the notice of Antonio Perez, the disgraced secretary to Spain's king. Still reeling from the defeat of his armada, the king is desperate for any advantage in the war against England's heretic queen, and Perez will stop at nothing to regain the king's favor. Determined to seize this one chance to better her fortunes, Luisa plunges into a world of seers and alchemists, holy men and hucksters, where the lines between magic, science, and fraud are never certain. But as her notoriety grows, so does the danger that her Jewish blood will doom her to the Inquisition's wrath. She will have to use every bit of her wit and will to survive, even if that means enlisting the help of Julian Santangelo, not sure how to pronounce that, an embittered immortal familiar whose secrets could prove deadly for them both. Ooh, that sounds so good. So anything that involves alchemy and magic and familiars always catches my interest. Much of the work that I did for my doctorate involved the history of magic, distillation, and alchemy. So yeah, I love those themes, and yeah, I'm really excited for it. I've seen this one on BookTube quite a bit, so I imagine it's going to be one of the most popular books of the year. Have you seen this book on BookTube or BookTok, and are you excited to read it? Let me know in the comments below. And the last book we have is another nonfiction book, and you might be a little bit intrigued as to why I picked this one. So it's called Hedge Lands, A Wild Wander Around Britain's Greatest Habitat by Christopher Hart. This comes out in April. And the blurb reads, in this joyous journey around the wild edges of Britain, Christopher Hart takes us through the life, ecology, and history of the humble British hedge, showing us how this much loved but somewhat overlooked feature is inextricably woven into our language, history, and culture. Now, I enjoy reading nature books anyways, and so I think this one sounds like a delightful book, although very specific to hedgerows. But the reason why this one really caught my attention, perhaps more than some of the other nature writing nonfiction works coming out this year, is exactly because it's about hedgerows. So a little bit of a story time. My first history class in my undergraduate degree, and this was back in Canada, was a survey called The Making of the British Isles, I believe. And so little undergraduate me went into that class not knowing what to expect. And one of the first books that I had to read was called The Making of the English Landscape by the notable W.G. Hoskins. He was a very well-known British historian. And that book was great. It was such an interesting read to understand the natural and cultural history of the British Isles. But I was very drawn to the history of hedgerows. I'd never encountered hedgerows before because they're not, I'm sure we have them in Canada, but they're not really as integral to the landscape. And so I had inadvertently learned this whole history of the hedgerows before I'd even moved to the UK. And actually, I would say that book, or at least that course in general, is the reason why I became a British historian and has possibly contributed to why I now live in the UK. So yeah, very influential, those hedgerows. And yeah, so because this book sounds like it's similar to that book by W.G. Hoskins, that is why I'm excited to read it. Now that I live in the UK, I enjoy going for walks, looking at hedgerows. They're so important for the biodiversity and sustainability of our natural environment. And as the book alludes to, they're really important for our cultural history as well. So yeah, those are all the books, some of the books, I should say, that I'm most excited to read that are coming out this year in 2024. Let me know in the comments below, what are the books that you are most looking forward to reading that are coming out this year? Do you want to read any of the books that I mentioned? I mean, if anybody wants to read the book about hedgerows, then please do let me know, because I hope I'm not the only one. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been really great to connect with so many of you, and I'm really thankful that you are finding my channel and subscribing and engaging with me in the comments. That's exactly what I wanted in this little booktube community. So once again, thank you for joining me, and I will see you soon.